Welcome to the One Climbs Podcast, a show about exploring life through the lens of theology, scripture, symbolism, and ideas that uplift the human mind. I'm going to share some thoughts today about the phrase "eye of faith" that we find in the Book of Mormon in three particular places. We have it once in Alma 5:15, Alma 32:40, and Ether 12:19. And this particular phrase was brought up a couple of times in our Elders Quorum class today. We were reading a talk from General Conference, and this phrase kept popping up. And I had some thoughts that I wanted to share about it, but I just didn't get around to it. And I had already given a talk in church today, so I figure, well, I've talked enough for today, so I'm just going to sit on these thoughts, and if an opportunity presents itself, I'll take it. But that opportunity didn't come up again. The topic shifted a little bit, and there were some things that I think were probably more important to discuss that day. So anyway, let's go ahead and dig into this a little bit, and I'm going to be leaning on an article I wrote back in 2011 called "What is the Eye of Faith?" And for quite a while, I had been really intrigued by this phrase. I had a copy of the Book of Mormon that I started marking up when I was a missionary, and what I was looking for were all of the phrases and doctrinal ideas and principles, like whatever I could find that was unique to the Book of Mormon. And I'd started filling up this particular copy I have, and then I actually lended it to somebody that, in my better judgment, I probably shouldn't have lended it to. It was like losing the lost 116 pages. No, that was much more devastating of a loss. But, you know, I put it in the hands of somebody, and it was not surprising to me when they lost not only that, but also another copy of the Book of Mormon where I had marked every reference to Jesus Christ. I had a couple of things that I lended to this individual, but I will keep their name anonymous for now. But anyway, after a lot of time had gone by, I started compiling new lists and searching for these different ideas that were unique to the Book of Mormon that you could only really find there. And this phrase is one of them. You know, only occurring in three places. And it seems to stand at odds with a lot of what we hear in the world, particularly another type of phrase, blind faith. You expect me to take this on blind faith, right? We hear blind faith coming up every now and then when people are talking about things. And that is the assumption, blind faith. And here we have in the Book of Mormon this phrase, "eye of faith." It seems like it's the exact opposite of this idea of blind faith. So what does this mean? Well, I spent many years pondering this and searching the scriptures and trying to find whatever answers I could, but I was kind of coming up short on any outside ideas. Some of the things that I'd read were like, well, you look at things differently, right? Just have a faithful way of looking at things. And I just felt like there was something more to it. And so as time went on, this is something that just occurred over a long period of time. There wasn't any big aha moment. But what I did is I turned back to the scriptures and I read them over and over again. And one of the things that's been really helpful to me, and I think I mentioned this before, is I just kind of read the Book of Mormon on a loop. And so even now in a new year, I'm in Mosiah 5, but we've just started off in 1 Nephi. Well, I'm not going to start over. I'm going to keep reading in Mosiah 5, and I'm going to read 1 Nephi along with my family and whatnot, and just do both. This has happened. This kind of happens every 4 years. Maybe I should time them to where they line up, but it just never works out that way. I think the last 4-year period, I was in Third Nephi, and so I'm a little bit closer to the beginning. But anyway, I just want to share with you. Let's read through these three instances and see what they're talking about. So, two are in Alma, one's in Ether. Alma 5:15 says, Do you exercise faith in the redemption of him who created you? Do you look forward with an eye of faith and view this body raised in immortality and this corruption raised in incorruption to stand before God to be judged according to the deeds which have been done in the mortal body? And so this is Alma speaking here. And this is the first occurrence of it. Do you look forward with an eye of faith? It's the first time it appears. And view your mortal body raised in immortality. So very interesting. So Alma 32:40. And thus, if you will nourish the word, looking forward with an eye of faith to the fruit thereof, you can never pluck the fruit of the tree of life. So again, one is looking forward to kind of view yourself raised in immortality. It's like, can you picture yourself being raised to a mortal state? And in this other verse, talking about nourishing the word, this is Alma 32, where he's talking about planting the word like a seed and growing it like a plant. But he says to look forward with an eye of faith to the fruit thereof. So in both of these cases, you're looking forward to a future state, right? And that seems to make a lot of sense, but I think there's still more to it. Now in Ether 12:19, this is, I believe this is Moroni. I think it's Moroni writing here. Now, granted, he's got commentary that's being written about the people that he's been talking about, and some of his memories about what he has likely read over time. I imagine during this time that Moroni is creating his own record, he's read the entirety of his father Mormon's abridgment of his entire people, and perhaps came across this phrase, eye of faith, and he uses it here. And he says, and there were many whose faith was so exceedingly strong, even before Christ came, who could not be kept from within the veil. And he's referencing the brother of Jared here, but truly saw with the eyes and the things which they had beheld with an eye of faith, and they were glad. So the brother of Jared was truly one of these, but he's talking there were many who saw with their natural eyes those things that they had only beheld with an eye of faith. So again, I think Moroni's kind of being inspired by Alma's language here in using that specific phrase. And so, yeah, we're admonished to look forward, but then there were things that there were many people who actually, this space between their initial faith and the reality of what they were looking forward to narrowed until it was eliminated, and reality was there before them. So still we have this question of, well, what is the eye of faith? Is it just being able to picture that future state? What is it exactly? So there's at least three elements at work, I think. We have an eye, faith, and looking forward. So the eye is the organ of sight or vision in our bodies, and faith is any action based on belief and a hope of achievement, right? And then looking forward, future can be perceived through this eye. We're seeing a future state, right? And so here's where I think one of the clues is, how do we know what that future state is going to be? How can we know the future? Because we can't predict it. If I tell you right now to tell me what the future will hold for you in 10 years, you can guess, right? You don't know for sure. You might get in a horrific car accident 2 years from now, not live to see any of it. There are many things that we just simply cannot predict. We have no way of knowing. But that's not what an eye of faith seems to imply. Because with God, he cannot lie. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And when he promises something, it will come to pass. No matter what, it will. And so here's where I think the difference is, right? But let's dig into something else here. There are two examples that I want to point to, particularly Enos and the brother of Jared. And they had a similar experience. And they say something that is only found twice in all of the Book of Mormon. So it's a slightly more rare than the phrase "eye of faith." It's in Enos 1:3, Enos 1:6. Let's kind of start there. So he says, "There came a voice to me saying." So anyway, to proceed a little bit, or he's going out into the woods. He's concerned about his redemption. He's remembering all the words that his father spoke. He's going out to hunt beasts in the forest. And then all of this stuff just starts coming onto him, pours onto him. And he seemingly forgets about the hunt and just turns and cries out to the Lord all day long and into the night. And for a long time here. And after this wrestle that he has, in Enos 1:3, he says that a voice came unto him saying, "Enos, thy sins are forgiven thee. Thou shalt be blessed." And in Enos 1:6, it says, "And I, Enos, knew that God could not lie, wherefore my guilt was swept away." Right? I knew that God could not lie. So this is a very powerful concept. And it may sound kind of simple, because you could ask anybody, right? Does God lie? And pretty much everyone would say, well, no, God can't lie. He wouldn't, right? I think that's one thing. But if you ask them, do you know of yourself, could you testify that you personally know that God cannot lie? I think the answers would be different. And in the Greek language, and this is reflected in the Greek New Testament, there are different words for knowledge. I think there's like 3 or 4. Gnosis means to know. And I remember in Institute, I learned about the word epignosis, which does imply knowledge, but knowledge through an intimate experience. It seems a little tricky to define, but that's kind of how, at least I understood the definition, is knowledge gained through personal, intimate, tangible experience, epignosis. And so in English, we just have one word, know, to know something. And that can mean, oh, I know about something, but it could also mean, knowing how a broken femur feels. Like if you've broken a femur before. I have not. I do not know that pain. I do know back pain. I do know horrific back pain very, very well. And so it's strange that in English, we don't have words to express all these different levels of knowledge, but other languages do. So pretty cool. But do we know through experience, right? And in verse 7, Enos says, "Lord, how is it done?" He doesn't even understand how this happened. How was his guilt just swept away? He knew God couldn't lie, and as soon as God said words, right? He said, "Your sins are forgiven." Immediately his guilt is swept away, and he's like, "Wait, how did this happen? How was this done?" But it's because God said it. And if God said it, it's as solid as reality. And Enos, at some point in his life, had some type of experience where this idea was cemented in him, to the extent that all God had to do was speak, and it was enough for him to know that it would be done, and his guilt was immediately swept away. And in a significant way, one in which Enos almost seems surprised by it. He asks, how is this done, right? So let's fast forward. Actually, we're going back in time Way back in time. Ether 12:20, we have the brother of Jared up on the mountain, and he sees the finger of the Lord coming out of the cloud, and he falls to the earth, and he's afraid. He doesn't know what this means. He's very confused. And the Lord, he asks him, he said, do you see any more than this? You know? And the brother of Jared says, no, show thyself to me. And the Lord asks him a very interesting question. Here the brother of Jared is saying, Lord, show thyself to me, which sounds pretty bold. It sounds like he's almost commanding the Lord. But, and I thought that for a while. I was like, man, that's a bold statement to just say to God, like, God, show yourself to me, right? That's not what he's doing. A couple verses earlier, we read him saying, he's crying out to the Lord, and he's saying, I know that we're weak, weak, undeserving people, basically, but you've commanded us that we should come to you, and whatever we desire, we should pour out our desires to you, whatever it was, not hide our desires from the Lord. And so at this time, the Lord says, did you see anything more than this? And the brother of Jared at this point, it's almost like he doesn't have a filter with God. Out from his mouth comes whatever his desire is, because he trusts God, right? And so at this time, the Lord doesn't say, no, of course not. He doesn't scold the brother of Jared for asking for the Lord to show himself to him. Instead, the Lord answers his question, or his request, with a question. He says, believest thou the words which I shall speak? He didn't say, oh, well, I'll show you to me, but do you believe everything that I've said thus far? He doesn't say that. He says, do you believe the words that I'm going to speak that I haven't spoken yet? Do you believe in those words? Words you don't even know, that haven't even yet been spoken, but that I will speak. Do you believe them? This was a little bit, I don't want to say it's a trick question, but it is certainly a very intriguing question, right? Do you believe in words you haven't even heard yet, but that I will speak? It's almost like he's setting him up. He's setting him up for like a slam dunk. And the brother of Jared sees what's going on, and he completes the dunk right here in the next verse. The brother of Jared answers, yea, Lord, I know that thou speakest the truth, for thou art a God of truth, canst not lie. And so I think on your first read, you might say that what the brother of Jared was being asked was if he believes in the words. Do you believe in the words which God will speak, right? But the brother of Jared's answer shows that the words don't matter. It does not matter at all what the words are. Because the brother of Jared says, it's about the Lord. The Lord speaks the truth, and he cannot lie. So it doesn't matter what the words are. So he says, yea, I know that thou speakest the truth. He knows the source of the words is pure. So it doesn't matter what the words are. So he sidesteps this question in a way. And I think he answers it exactly the way the Lord was intending. He understood. He got it. And so he realizes here that the words of the Lord can be trusted because of who he is. Not that the words sound possible or impossible or easy to believe or hard to believe. None of that matters. It's who says them that matters, and his characteristics and his attributes. And so I think this is the key here. The eye of faith works because the future state that is being promised by the Lord through his commandments, his prophecies, and his word, right? And so I think the one individual we see this reflected in, and this is probably why this is a good time to bring this up, is I think Nephi is one of, besides Enos and the brother of Jared, Nephi exemplifies this more than anyone I can think of in terms of scripture heroes, right? Because anytime he's faced with a hard or difficult situation, it doesn't matter how difficult it is. It doesn't matter. He says, if I needed to, I could stretch out my hand right now and command this sea to be earth and it would be done. That's where he's at, right? But yet he's still going through the process of building a ship because that's what the Lord told him to do. The Lord told him, I need you to build a ship. And he didn't say, well, Lord, that's impossible. Or how on earth? He goes, where do I go to get ore so I can start building tools? Show me where the ore is. I need to get started building these tools. The first question wasn't like, well, how am I going to do that? First question is show me, not even provide tools for me. Show me where I need to go to get the ores to start making tools. He's like, okay, done. If that's what's going to happen, I'm going to get prepared. And we see this over and over and over again with Nephi. The confidence he has to stand firm and strong and immovable in the present is many, many times based on what the Lord has done for others, such as Joseph of Egypt, Moses, King David, and the list goes on and on. There's at least 7 to 9, probably more, that I've picked out from the scriptures. But as time goes on, Nephi's faith becomes so solid that he's one of these men. His faith and the things that he does in his own life put him on par with some of the great ones of the past. And I think his example to us is that can be us as well. And he even says so several times. The last verse of 1 Nephi chapter 1. Go read what he says there. And look at all the times he talks about the mysteries of God and how they could be made known to all of us. Nephi was all about empowering other people. And that's just who he was. And he became that person. We see him go from, just a young guy who's probably just as questioning as his elder brothers about what was happening, leaving their home of Jerusalem, going out in the wilderness. But we see this transformative effect. And it all comes from him leaning in to the promises of God and what God has done for others and his word and the fulfillment of his word. And so to kind of summarize it all up, I think a big portion of what the eye of faith is all about is that when we trust in God, even if we don't yet have that kind of trust in God, we can look at what he said in the past and what he's done for others. And we can look at the consistency of delivering people time and time again. And we can look in our own day. God has told us to keep the Sabbath day holy. It's a commandment. He's commanded us to do many, many things. And some of those things can be difficult for us. But is God a God of his word or not? Is he a God that cannot lie or not? Because if there's any variableness, any shadow of changing in him, then our faith is just as futile as trusting the weatherman or some guy on a rant in some forum online somewhere. The value is it's the same. But we're talking about the God of the universe here. We can look out into the vastness and beauty of all creation and look at the vastness and the beauty of God's relationship with the entire human family, with our fathers and our forefathers and our descendants going all the way back to Adam and Eve. And we can see that God is a God worthy of our trust, that he is a loving and benevolent Father, full of patience, long-suffering, justice, mercy, all of the qualities that inspire humanity. And when we put our faith in his word, the power of his character and his trustworthiness and everything that he is, when our faith is in him, in his word, it becomes like an eye. And I think that is the eye that led Nephi through all of his journeys. He had an eye single to the glory of God because of God and who he was. And just like the brother of Jared, who had such great faith, the Lord could not withhold anything from him because he knew the Lord could show him all things. And so faith in the living God endows that person of faith with an eye that can see and pierce all the confusion and all the doubt, and can lead us along a path where the promises of the Lord will eventually be fulfilled, to the point where we will no longer require an eye of faith, because we will see right before us with our own eyes the promises of the Lord fulfilled, just like many, many others have throughout the scriptures and all over the world, throughout all generations. People that have put their trust and faith in God have been rewarded. And unfortunately, today, it seems that many will set aside this faith in God for trust in the arm of flesh. And we live in a day and age where we see a massive just explosion of knowledge and information into the world. And it's easy to think that with the impressiveness of all of this knowledge, that there will be answers there that are easier to achieve than with a direct relationship with God. And if we're not careful, it's very easy for flesh to become our arm, and the workmanship of our own hands to become our God, to whom we seek for answers. And, lots of people out there who are supposed influencers and people that claim to have all the knowledge and ideas. And so it's not to say that we shouldn't share with one another. I mean, here I am creating a podcast talking about these things. And so it's one of those things where I think you have to check yourself and say, okay, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I'm trying to make money off of this? And I intentionally do not do anything that is profit-driven with One Climbs. And some people do. They sell notebooks and lesson materials and stuff. And, I'm not going to place judgment on that. But for me, there's no cost or expense. This is all just about sharing the things that I find along the journey. If they happen to help somebody, great. If not, that's fine. But anyway, there are just so many voices out there. And what I hope comes across in the content that I produce is just a testimony of the things that I've experienced and that I know. And I know that God is worthy of our trust. And I have put my trust in him. I have certainly had my share of really difficult spots where I had to put all on the Lord. And maybe I'll share some of those things one day, but God is completely worthy of our trust and our faith. Nobody else is, but God is. And if we give him an opportunity to prove himself to us, because he wants to prove himself to us. He doesn't want to force upon us his will, and he won't. He will not force his will upon us. That is not in his nature to. But he does want a relationship with us, as a father does with their child. And all that can kind of seem daunting at times. It's truly what the Lord wants. He wants to share and open up and pour out his love upon us so that we can navigate these things in life through an eye of faith and not blindly. Faith doesn't necessarily mean that we can see everything in front of us with a perfect knowledge. A perfect knowledge will come in time. But until that time, it doesn't matter, because if we know the God in whom we trust, sight is not the most important sense or quality. There are much more powerful things than sight that can govern us as we consciously navigate our lives. And I think that's one of the things we're here to learn. Sight, our senses, they can be tempting to lean upon because we think we know something by them. But we only see a tiny sliver of the visible spectrum of light that there is. What's visible to human beings is a sliver. I think it's just a tiny percentage. I looked up the numbers one time. I think I have it somewhere. I think I gave a talk about it at one point. It might be on One Climb somewhere. But yeah, we see a sliver. If you were 98% blind, you'd probably be just considered blind, right? We're 98%, somewhere around there, high 90s% blind to almost all of the light in the spectrum. Same with sound. Our ability to hear would make us deaf. We're technically deaf and blind. Not to mention the weaknesses of the other senses we have. So we navigate through this life thinking we see, thinking we hear, thinking we feel and smell and taste and touch. We have no idea how limited we are. And there are things that are far more powerful than these senses. We trust so much in our blindness because it's easy to. But I think in that ease, that's where deception can lie. So when we have the power of the eye of faith, we don't have to rely on what we see or what we think we see. Instead, we can rely on the words and the promises of the most intelligent and powerful being in the universe. Why would we not trust in that being? Why would we trust anything that is on a lesser rung, especially a fellow person that's also deaf and blind walking alongside us in life, unless that deaf and blind person is guiding us to the same God and is leading us to him. And his words and teachings are the words and teachings of the Lord. That would be the only exception. Well, anyway, I hope there's some value found in some of these thoughts. I think I'll post my talk today as well. But yeah, hopefully there's something of value in there for you as you navigate this life with an eye of faith.